Have you ever felt like reality is winking at you, like it's trying to get your attention but won't just say what it means? You look at the clock and it's 11:11. Later, someone randomly says a phrase that was just floating in your head. Then a song plays that perfectly matches the question you've been asking yourself silently. Strange, right? But what if these aren't just coincidences? What if you're witnessing signs, and the timing isn't just lucky, but meaningful? Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it synchronicity. It's when two or more events seem connected, not by cause and effect, but by a hidden kind of alignment. According to Jung, these moments reflect an inner transformation in the psyche. They are not accidents. They're expressions of the unconscious speaking through the world around you. And the more you start noticing them, the more it feels like life is whispering just behind your shoulder. Psychologists like Daniel Kahneman have shown how the mind system 1, the fast intuitive part of our brain, is constantly pattern hunting. We're built to notice repeated signals, but Jung took it a step further. He believed your unconscious projects onto the outer world. When you're in the middle of deep emotional change, your mind starts to organize experience in symbolic ways. The outer world becomes a mirror, reflecting parts of you that are waking up. That's why people who are on the cusp of change often report seeing strange alignments, repeating numbers, animals crossing their path at key moments, even words overheard in conversations that feel almost too personal. These aren't always messages with a clear meaning, but they are signposts. They're nudges. They invite you to stop, to feel, and to ask, why now? This video will help you understand what these signs are, why they show up when they do, and how to respond to them without losing your sense of grounding. We'll explore 5 subtle but powerful indicators that you are truly shifting, emotionally, psychologically, and maybe even spiritually. And we won't just explain them, we'll back them with research, real experiments, and practical tools. By the end of this journey, you'll understand how to work with these signals, not dismiss them. You'll know what it means when old joys start feeling hollow, when your dreams suddenly become more vivid, or when the same emotional drama keeps playing out in your life again and again. These aren't random. They're your psyche's breadcrumbs. Follow them, and they'll lead you to something real. Here's a question to reflect on. What's the weirdest repeating symbol or phrase you've seen this week? Go ahead, drop it in the comments. Let's see how many of us are getting these signs at the same time. Because maybe that's no coincidence either. Isolation that expands you. Have you found yourself pulling away from people lately? Not out of anger, but because everything outside feels too loud, too chaotic, too distracting. If you're choosing silence over small talk or long walks alone over noisy gatherings, it doesn't mean something's wrong. In fact, it could mean you're finally tuning in to what's right. When the psyche begins to shift, the first thing it often craves is space. Carl Jung knew this well. He spent long stretches alone in his stone retreat, Bollingen Tower, where he painted, carved, and let his thoughts unfold without interruption. He believed that the unconscious needs quiet to be heard, not just physical silence, but mental space, free from the opinions, expectations, and noise of other people's realities. Neurologically, there's something remarkable happening here too. When you're alone, the default mode network in your brain becomes more active. This is the region involved in self-reflection, memory consolidation, and internal storytelling. In simpler words, your brain starts stitching together meaning when it's not being constantly distracted. Solitude literally helps your brain connect dots that noise blocks out. But let's be honest, isolation isn't always comfortable. A fascinating 2014 study from the University of Virginia found that many people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone in silence for 15 minutes. Think about that. Silence can feel like a confrontation. It exposes all the feelings we've been ignoring, and that's exactly why it's powerful. This phase of pulling back is often a protective reflex of the psyche. You're not becoming distant, you're creating space for reorganization. Anthony Storr, in his powerful but lesser-known book, Solitude: A Return to the Self, explains how some of the most creative and emotionally integrated people often went through periods of chosen isolation. These weren't breakdowns, they were breakthroughs incubating in quiet. Jungian psychology sees this as the beginning of individuation. The process of becoming your true self, not the self that was shaped by others. The very act of withdrawing, when it feels intuitive, is a form of reclaiming your inner voice. Here's something to try. Commit to 72 hours of ambient silence. That means no background music, no podcasts, no YouTube playing while you scroll. Let your environment breathe. Let your mind wander without a script. Notice what thoughts emerge. Pay attention to the discomfort. That's not a flaw. It's material. It's raw data from your unconscious. And if you find yourself craving connection again after the silence, great. But this time, it'll come from a grounded place, not from fear of being alone. You'll know you're choosing people, not clinging to them. So the next time you find yourself pulling away from the crowd, don't panic. Don't rush to fill the space. That quiet might be the exact condition your transformation needs. Your old joys feel hollow. Have you noticed that the things you used to love just don't hit the same anymore? The songs you once played on repeat now feel distant. Your favorite comfort food doesn't spark the same excitement. The hobbies that used to light you up feel like chores. It's not burnout. It's not boredom. It's evolution. This is one of the most quietly powerful signs that you're growing. And it often feels confusing. You ask yourself, why don't I enjoy this anymore? What's wrong with me? But nothing is wrong. In fact, something very right might be happening under the surface. What you're experiencing is a dopaminergic reset. In neuroscience, dopamine is the brain's motivation chemical. It's released when we anticipate pleasure, not just when we experience it. But as your values shift, your inner world begins to rewire. The brain's reward system, especially the ventral striatum, becomes less responsive to things that no longer align with your evolving identity. There's even science to back this up. In a Stanford affective forecasting study, participants were asked to predict how happy they'd feel after winning a small gamble. Most of them overestimated the joy they'd experience. The actual feelings didn't match the expectation. Why? Because our brain isn't great at keeping up with internal change. When your identity shifts, your old pleasures can't keep delivering the same emotional reward. Carl Jung believed that we aren't meant to chase the same joys forever. As the self transforms, so do our sources of meaning. And when the unconscious begins pushing forward, the ego, your surface self, starts to lose interest in the things that used to define it. It feels like emptiness at first, but it's actually spaciousness. Psychologist James Hollis captures this in his book, The Middle Passage. He writes, "We are not our pleasures, we are the hunger beneath them." That hollow feeling, it's the hunger. The ache for something deeper, something more aligned with your emerging self. This doesn't mean you'll never feel joy again. It just means the source of your joy is shifting from surface-level stimulation to soul-level engagement. You might start craving more meaningful conversations, different creative outlets, or deeper intellectual challenges. Here's something practical to help. Do a value inventory. Sit down with a blank page and write out the things that feel genuinely meaningful to you right now. Don't focus on what you think you should enjoy. Focus on what feels alive, even if it's small, even if it scares you. This process isn't about chasing highs. It's about tuning into a new frequency. So when your favorite things lose their flavor, don't force it. Don't try to revive the old you. Listen to what the hollowness is asking for. It's not the end of joy. It's the beginning of meaning. Recurring life patterns, the psychic echo. Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a loop? You meet a new person, only to end up in the same arguments you had with someone years ago. You switch jobs, but the same toxic dynamics show up again. You change your location, but somehow, your struggles follow you like a shadow. This isn't bad luck. It's something far more important. It's a mirror, and it's showing you what's unfinished inside. Carl Jung explained this phenomenon using the idea of complexes, clusters of unconscious thoughts, emotions, and memories that repeat themselves until they're made conscious. Think of them as emotional magnets, pulling you back into situations that feel familiar, even when they hurt. They're not trying to punish you. They're trying to get your attention. Modern psychology backs this up. In a 2022 fMRI study at the University of Hamburg, researchers observed that participants unconsciously reenacted childhood relational patterns with strangers in less than 15 minutes. This aligns perfectly with what's known as schema theory in cognitive behavioral psychology. A schema is a mental framework, often built in early life, that shapes how we interpret the world. If your schema tells you love equals rejection, you'll seek out situations that prove that true, again and again, until you rewire it. Jung's most famous quote hits home here. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What feels like destiny might actually be a loop waiting to be broken. Robert L. Moore, in his underrated gem The Archetype of Initiation, wrote that these repeating emotional patterns often aren't just psychological, they're symbolic. They represent mythic thresholds, opportunities to graduate into the next stage of your inner life, but only if you recognize them. So how do you interrupt a pattern that's running on autopilot? Start a pattern diary. For the next 7 days, write down moments when you feel emotionally triggered. Note what happened, how you reacted, and what the outcome was. Then ask yourself, what's the common thread here? What belief or fear seems to be underneath this? Once you spot the pattern, you're no longer trapped by it. You can test new reactions, make new choices, and show your brain that novelty can be safe. This is where real change begins, not from force, but from awareness. So if it feels like life is glitching and throwing you the same test over and over, it's not broken, it's intelligent. It's your psyche's way of saying, you're strong enough to see this now, strong enough to change it. Emotional limbo, fear plus curiosity cocktail. Do you feel like you're stuck in a strange in-between? Not who you used to be, but not yet who you're becoming. One part of you is scared, uncertain, maybe even anxious, but another part is curious, intrigued. Something inside is quietly excited, even if you don't fully understand why. That strange tension, where fear meets fascination, is not a breakdown, it's a transformation already in motion. This emotional limbo is more common than people admit, and it's one of the most powerful signs that you're moving in the right direction. Carl Jung often spoke about the creative void, a psychological space that feels empty, but is actually full of potential. It's the pause before the leap, the moment when your old identity is dissolving and a new one is just beginning to emerge. Biologically, something fascinating is happening here. Your brain is producing both cortisol, the stress hormone, and dopamine, the motivation chemical, at the same time. That's incredibly rare. According to research in psychophysiology, this cocktail signals what scientists call adaptive plasticity. Your brain is preparing for change. It's rewiring in real time. You might even feel torn. One part of you wants to pull back to safety, while another part wants to push forward into something new. This tug of war is not a mistake. It's a sign your inner system is testing new emotional territory. Søren Kierkegaard had a brilliant take on this. He said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. It's the feeling of standing on the edge of a wide-open possibility and realizing you could leap, but not knowing what will happen if you do." Neuroscientist Richard Davidson's work with mindfulness adds even more depth here. In a longitudinal study, participants who practiced staying present with emotional discomfort, rather than avoiding it, developed thicker anterior cingulate cortices. This area of the brain is linked to self-regulation, awareness, and emotional processing. In short, when you stay with the discomfort, your brain evolves. This is beautifully echoed in William Bridges' book Transitions, where he maps what he calls the neutral zone, a psychological space between an old identity and a new one. Most people try to skip it, but those who honor it end up more aligned, more self-aware, and more resilient. Try this. Whenever you feel mixed emotions, fear, excitement, sadness, hope, say them out loud. Literally, name them. According to psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett, labeling emotions reduces amygdala activity. It soothes the chaos. It tells your nervous system, I see you. I can handle this. So if you feel like you're floating between two worlds, unsure of what's next, don't rush to escape. This emotional limbo is sacred. It means the old you is shedding, and the new you is strong enough to be born. Vivid, symbol-heavy dreams. Have your dreams started getting weird lately? Not just random or bizarre, but unusually intense, like they're trying to say something. Maybe you're seeing the same symbol over and over. Maybe certain people or animals keep showing up. Maybe the emotions in your dreams feel stronger than the ones you experience during the day. If that's happening, pay attention, because when your waking mind doesn't understand what's going on, your unconscious takes over the night shift. Carl Jung believed that dreams are the language of the unconscious. He didn't see them as meaningless brain noise, but as symbolic stories, crafted from your psyche's deepest needs, wounds, and potential. When the unconscious starts pushing toward the surface, usually during a period of inner transformation, your dreams become more vivid, more layered, and much harder to ignore. Science agrees. During REM sleep, your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain, lights up. At the same time, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and filtering, becomes less active. This unique brain state allows raw emotional material to rise without being censored. That's why dream symbols can be so powerful. They're not logical, but they're deeply meaningful. Neuropsychologist Mark Solms discovered that patients with damage to specific parts of the brain lost the ability to dream, and along with it, the ability to fully process their emotions. His research showed that dreaming isn't just a passive state. It's part of how we digest psychological experience. When your dreams intensify, your psyche is literally doing emotional maintenance. Joseph Campbell once said, "Dreams are private myths. Myths are public dreams." In other words, the images in your dreams are not random. They're universal patterns, archetypes, tailored specifically to you. In his lesser-known but powerful book Inner Work, Jungian analyst Robert A. Johnson outlines a 4-step method to understand your dreams. Recall, record, analyze the symbols, and respond. He emphasized that dreams aren't puzzles to be solved, they're relationships to be built. When you start listening to them, they begin speaking more clearly. If you're seeing recurring symbols, snakes, falling, elevators, shadows, don't Google the meaning. Ask yourself how they felt. What were you doing? What was unresolved? Your unconscious doesn't speak English. It speaks in mood, image, movement. Here's a simple tool to help. Commit to a 21-night dream journal challenge. Keep a notebook by your bed and write down everything you remember the moment you wake up, even if it's just fragments. Over time, you'll begin to see patterns, not just in the dreams, but in your waking emotional landscape. So if your dreams are getting more symbolic, more alive, or more intense, that's not insomnia or overthinking. That's your unconscious reaching out saying, "Now that you're listening, let me show you what you've missed." Reflective writing and self-dialogue. Have you ever tried writing just to see what would come out? Not for school, not for a blog, just you, the pen, and the page. No pressure, no audience, just a question or a feeling, and the silence that follows it. Reflective writing isn't just journaling. It's one of the most overlooked yet powerful ways to access your unconscious and get real answers from within. Carl Jung often practiced something called active imagination, a method where he would write back and forth with different parts of himself. He believed the unconscious wasn't silent or passive. It was alive, waiting to be heard. When you create a space for it to speak, it usually does. And sometimes, what it says changes everything. Psychologist James Pennebaker conducted groundbreaking research on what's now called expressive writing. In one study, people who wrote for just 15 minutes a day about emotionally meaningful topics visited the doctor 40% less in the following months. That's not just therapeutic, it's physiological. Writing literally reshapes the nervous system by helping the brain make sense of chaos. Why does this happen? Because when we write without editing ourselves, we access subconscious content, thoughts and beliefs just beneath the surface. This builds what's known as emotional coherence. We start to recognize patterns, process grief, clarify what we actually want, and even spot where we're lying to ourselves. Martin Heidegger once wrote, "Language is the house of being." That may sound abstract, but it's deeply practical. The words you use to describe your life don't just reflect your reality, they shape it. That's why reflective writing is not about being poetic. It's about being honest, raw, curious, even uncomfortable. In Writing to Awaken, Mark Matusek offers a simple but transformative technique, the two-voice letter. First, write a letter from your surface self, the version of you that goes about everyday life. Then, switch roles. Let your inner voice, the part that feels deeper, wiser, maybe even uncomfortable, respond. Don't overthink it. Just listen. The dialogue that unfolds can be shockingly accurate, even if it makes no sense at first. You can ask yourself anything. Why am I afraid of change? What does this sadness want me to know? What part of me feels left behind? These questions unlock layers that can't be reached by logic alone. So if you feel emotionally clogged or stuck in confusion, try this. Sit down with a pen and paper and write what you're afraid to say out loud. You're not trying to fix anything. You're letting the truth have a voice. And sometimes, just putting it into words can move energy that's been stuck for years. That movement, that's alignment, that's progress. That's your unconscious saying, now we're finally getting somewhere. Meditation and active imagination. Do you ever wish you could just slow everything down? Your thoughts, your fears, your need to constantly respond? That somewhere inside the noise, you could hear something wiser guiding you. Meditation is one of the simplest, yet most underestimated ways to unlock that clarity. But when paired with Jung's technique of active imagination, it becomes something even more profound, a real-time conversation with your unconscious. Let's start with what meditation does to your brain. Long-term meditators have been found to develop increased gyrification. That's the folding of the cerebral cortex, especially in the insula, the brain's self-awareness hub. This isn't just a feel-good practice, it's structural change. Meditation strengthens the pathways that connect thoughts with feelings, awareness with intention. In a Harvard study on mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, participants who practiced for just 8 weeks showed reduced activity in the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for overthinking and self-judgment. Less noise, more presence, more space for what truly matters to come through. Now, Jung's approach takes it a step further. He developed a method called active imagination, which involves entering a meditative state and then allowing images, characters, or feelings to surface. You don't analyze them. You talk to them. You visualize yourself walking through a door in your mind and meeting a figure, maybe an animal, a person, or even a shape. Then you listen. What do they say? What do they want? In Jungian psychology, this isn't fantasy. It's dialogue with the symbolic mind. And through this conversation, unconscious material becomes conscious. You're not daydreaming, you're decoding. In the mind, illuminated by Culadasa, John Yates, meditation is broken down into practical stages that help you stabilize attention, deepen awareness, and ultimately gain access to those inner images with more clarity and control. His work blends Buddhist meditation with neuroscience, giving you a step-by-step framework that's easy to follow. So here's a practice you can try today. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and imagine a door. Behind it is a part of your inner world that's been trying to reach you. Walk through. Let the scene appear without forcing it. Ask a simple question, like, what am I not seeing right now? Then just observe. Let the answers rise naturally. This isn't about escaping reality. It's about enriching it. Because once you start hearing your inner guidance more clearly, decisions become easier. Doubts lose power, and the noise outside quiets down because you're finally listening to what's inside. So if your mind feels chaotic, don't fight it. Sit with it, breathe through it, then knock on that inner door. You might be surprised who or what answers. Pattern journaling and data tracking. Do you keep running into the same problems even when you're actively trying to grow? The same kinds of arguments, the same inner resistance, the same emotional crash after a high? Most people chalk this up to bad luck or bad habits. But here's a secret. It's not just about willpower, it's about visibility. And the best way to create that visibility is through journaling your patterns like a scientist. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it runs your life. But what does that actually mean in daily experience? It means that every reaction, every emotional spike, every decision you regret later, they're not random. They follow a structure. And when you start logging that structure, you stop being controlled by it. There's real cognitive power in this approach. The act of tracking your emotional and behavioral loops activates the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for objective decision-making and self-monitoring. In simple terms, writing down your patterns gives you the perspective to change them. Think of it this way: the more you measure something, the more influence you gain over it. That's why Gary Klein's pre-mortem technique, where teams imagine a project failing before it begins, has been used to reduce project failure rates by up to 30%. The same strategy applies to your inner world. Track the loop before it repeats. Here's a practical way to start. Create a spreadsheet or a notebook page with 5 columns: trigger, emotion, action, result, and possible alternative. Every time something emotionally intense happens, log it. You'll begin to see exactly what sets you off, what you do in response, and where the pattern repeats. Over time, you might notice that every time you feel rejected, you isolate yourself. Or every time you succeed, you self-sabotage. That moment of recognition is gold. That's where power returns to you. In Seeing What Others Don't, Gary Klein explores how insight happens not through brilliance, but through pattern recognition. He found that most breakthroughs come from noticing what's missing, not what's obvious. That's exactly what pattern journaling does. It helps you see what your unconscious is quietly orchestrating beneath the surface. This isn't about overanalyzing your life. It's about understanding your life as a series of feedback loops and learning how to step into the role of observer rather than just participant. When you bring clarity to the unconscious, it loses its grip. You're no longer reacting, you're choosing. So start today. Track one loop, just one, and if you stick with it, you'll begin to see something amazing. You were never stuck. You just didn't have the map. Micro shifts in behavioral design. Ever feel like change is too overwhelming to even begin? Like you know what you should do, but the gap between where you are and where you want to be just feels too big? That's where most people stop. But transformation doesn't need to start with a leap. It begins with something much smaller, micro shifts. Carl Jung believed that major psychological change doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, through a process of integration. The unconscious doesn't want you to flip your life upside down overnight. It wants alignment, and sometimes that begins with something as small as a 60-second ritual repeated daily. In behavioral psychology, there's a concept that backs this perfectly: behavioral design. B.J. Fogg, founder of the Stanford Behavior Design Lab, created the tiny habits method based on one principle: make change so small it feels almost effortless. Why? Because small actions bypass the brain's resistance system, especially the basal ganglia, which stores habitual behavior. Tiny habits don't trigger the same alarms that big goals do. There's a powerful study from Cornell University where researchers made one small tweak in a cafeteria. They reduced tray size by 10%. That minor shift led to a 14% reduction in calorie consumption. No diets, no willpower, just one tiny change in the environment. That's the power of behavioral design. It makes the right thing easier, not harder. This mirrors the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, a term popularized by Masaki Imai in his book Kaizen, The Key to Japan's Competitive Success. It means continuous improvement through tiny, consistent actions. Not dramatic change, just 1% better every day. So here's your tool. Choose one micro shift that aligns with who you want to become. It could be a single affirmation you say while brushing your teeth, a mindful breath before answering your phone, a 30-second pause to ask yourself, is this in alignment with who I'm becoming? Don't underestimate it. These small decisions, repeated consistently, compound over time. They rewire your identity at the neurological level. You're not just forming habits, you're reprogramming the signals your brain associates with safety and reward. Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And your unconscious watches your actions far more closely than it listens to your intentions. So don't worry about massive life overhauls. Start small, trust small, celebrate small. One micro shift at a time, you build a life your future self will thank you for. Because the right path doesn't start with a big bang. It starts with one quiet yes. Integration through creative output. Have you ever had a powerful insight, only to feel it fade days later like a dream you didn't write down? That moment of clarity, that realization that felt life-changing, gone. This is one of the most frustrating parts of transformation. You feel like you're growing, but nothing sticks. That's because insight without integration doesn't last. The real key isn't just understanding, it's creating. Carl Jung understood that transformation isn't complete until it's expressed. He often encouraged his patients to draw, paint, sculpt, or even build physical models of the symbols and images that emerged in their inner work. Why? Because when you create, you embody what your unconscious is trying to teach you. You move the insight from mind into matter. Psychophysiology backs this up. When you translate an internal experience into a physical form, writing, music, dance, even a business plan, You activate multisensory encoding. That means the memory becomes more deeply stored because it engages sight, sound, touch, emotion, and decision-making. It becomes part of your nervous system. A 2020 fMRI study showed that when people engaged in spontaneous creative improvisation, they activated both the default mode network and the executive control network, two areas of the brain that are usually not active at the same time. That dual activation is rare, and it's a signature of integrated consciousness, your intuitive and analytical minds working together, harmonizing. Todd Henry, in his book The Accidental Creative, explains that creativity isn't something reserved for artists. It's a ritual, a discipline, a way to process life in a way that leads to action, not just inspiration. He outlines simple practices that help keep your ideas from floating away, setting daily idea capture sessions, building quick prototypes, and even treating creativity like a workout for the soul. So what can this look like for you? Let's say you've been journaling and you realize you're still holding on to fear from a past failure. Turn that into something. Write a letter to that version of yourself. Make a short audio recording giving advice to your younger self. Sketch a version of your fear and tape it to your mirror. Or build something, anything, that gives the insight a body. Better yet, try a 24-hour prototype sprint. Pick one idea, one emotion, or one belief you're working through, and express it in any form. A rough draft of a book, a sketch, a personal manifesto, a voice memo. Don't aim for perfect, aim for real. Because when you create from your insight, you give it structure, you make it visible. You tell your unconscious, I heard you, and I'm acting on it. This is the moment your transformation takes root, not in thought, in action. Connecting the dots. Let's pause for a moment and look back at what's unfolded. You've noticed yourself craving solitude more than social noise. The things that used to bring joy now feel strangely empty. The same emotional loops keep replaying in your life like a broken record. You felt stuck in a weird in-between space, restless but excited, nervous yet pulled forward. Your dreams have become more symbolic, more alive, and in the process, you've been writing, meditating, tracking patterns, experimenting with micro shifts, and even creating. None of this is random. These are not isolated experiences. They are connected, they are signs, and together, they form a map. What this map points to is something Carl Jung called the individuation process, the journey of becoming who you were always meant to be. Not a perfect version of yourself, not some shiny new identity, but the truest, most integrated version of you, the one who is no longer controlled by unconscious patterns, but aware of them, the one who listens to dreams, tracks emotions, speaks truth to fear, and makes choices aligned with a deeper voice inside. Let's bring it all together now. First, you observe. That means paying attention to signs, symbolic dreams, repeated emotional patterns, strange synchronicities. You document them through journaling, loop logging, or dream work, so your mind stops guessing and starts seeing. Then, you enter dialogue. You do this through reflective writing and active imagination. You talk to the parts of you that usually don't have a voice. You ask them what they want, what they need, and what they're afraid of. Next comes experimentation. You don't just think, you act. Through tiny habits, behavior design, and daily rituals, you teach your nervous system new ways of being. Small shifts build massive momentum when repeated with intention. Finally, you integrate. Through creativity, you embody what you've learned. You build something, share something, express something. Because when the inner world becomes visible in the outer world, that's when it sticks. That's when your transformation becomes real. Here's your challenge. Choose one micro shift you're going to begin today. Just one. It could be a morning journaling question, a 5-minute breathing session, a simple mantra, or a tiny act of courage. Whatever it is, make it yours. Then write it in the comments, not just to share it, but to declare it. And if someone you care about feels like they're stuck in a loop, send them this video. Let them know they're not lost. They're in transition. Remember this. The signs don't show up because you're special. They show up because you're ready. Your unconscious doesn't waste symbols on people who aren't paying attention. The fact that you're seeing them means the path is already forming beneath your feet. Keep going. The universe isn't testing you, it's trusting you. And your next step, no matter how small, is the proof that you trust yourself too.